Story 1: The Unseen Passenger. It was a typical Friday evening when Sarah found herself stuck in traffic on the way home from work. The city streets were congested, and the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch ominously. Frustrated by the slow-moving cars, she leaned on her horn, letting out a stream of pent-up anger. In her rearview mirror, she caught sight of a black SUV swerving closer. The driver, a middle-aged man with wild eyes and a furious scowl, glared at her as if she had personally insulted him. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She decided to ignore him, focusing instead on the red brake lights ahead. As the traffic finally began to inch forward, Sarah accelerated, desperate to escape the gridlock. But the SUV followed closely, almost like a predator stalking its prey. She switched lanes, trying to shake him off, but he mirrored her movements, his eyes never leaving her. Heart racing, Sarah's frustration morphed into sheer panic. She sped through a yellow light, hoping to lose him, but the SUV crashed into her rear bumper, sending her car spiraling into a ditch. Dazed, she stumbled out of the wreck, clutching her side as she scanned the area for the driver. The SUV had vanished without a trace. Confused and terrified, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The woods nearby loomed dark and foreboding, and she could have sworn she saw a shadowy figure lurking among the trees. That night, unable to shake the encounter from her mind, she replayed the events over and over, trying to make sense of it. The next day, while reading the news, Sarah learned that a woman had been killed in a road rage incident just weeks earlier. Her body had been found in those very woods. They said the woman's spirit roamed the area, seeking vengeance on those who had wronged her. The dread settled in Sarah's gut like a stone. She dismissed it as superstition, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. That evening, while sitting on her couch, a soft tapping sound echoed from outside. It was a gentle knock, like a persistent child trying to get attention. Heart racing, she approached the window. The sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. The black SUV parked across the street, empty, but the driver's seat was turned slightly, as if someone had just been there. Unable to bear it any longer, she decided to call a friend. They agreed to meet at a nearby diner, a place filled with people and bright lights. But as she drove, the familiar anxiety returned. Every car felt like the SUV, every corner a potential ambush. Later, while seated in the diner, Sarah saw the reflection of someone behind her in the window. She turned sharply, but there was no one there. Shaking, she dismissed it as her imagination, but she couldn't enjoy her meal. The unease grew, and she finally left, hurrying to her car. Story 2: The Final Ride. Mark was driving home late at night, the glow of streetlights casting flickering shadows on the asphalt. He had just finished a long shift at the hospital, and exhaustion weighed heavily on him. As he approached a deserted stretch of road, he found himself stuck behind a slow-moving vehicle, its brake lights illuminating the darkness like angry red eyes. Frustrated, Mark flashed his headlights and honked his horn. The driver, an older man with a bushy beard, glanced back but didn't speed up. Each second felt like an eternity, and anger bubbled within Mark. Unable to contain himself, he swerved around the vehicle, giving the man a furious gesture as he passed. The older man's face transformed from surprise to rage. He slammed his foot on the gas and followed Mark closely, his headlights blinding. Mark's heart raced as he accelerated, weaving in and out of lanes, desperately trying to escape. Suddenly, the man rammed Mark's car, sending him skidding off the road. The impact was jarring. Mark felt the air leave his lungs as he crashed into a tree. Dazed and disoriented, he stumbled out of the wreck, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Before he could gather his thoughts, the older man emerged from his vehicle, a sinister smile stretching across his face. "Why don't you drive like a decent person?" he hissed, brandishing a glinting blade. Mark felt a surge of adrenaline and grabbed a nearby branch, swinging it wildly. To his horror, the man seemed to glide back effortlessly, avoiding the blow as if he were merely a shadow. Panic surged through Mark. He swung again, desperation fueling his strikes, but each attempt was met with the man's chilling laughter. Then, in a moment of sheer terror, the man lunged forward, but instead of making contact, he simply faded into the night air, leaving only an echoing cackle behind him. Mark stood there, breathless and trembling, the eerie silence closing in around him. Weeks passed, but the encounter haunted Mark. Each time he drove down that same stretch of road, he felt the weight of the man's fury bearing down on him. He began to avoid driving at night, but the memory lingered like a shadow in his mind. One evening, against his better judgment, Mark found himself back on that road. He tried to shake off the anxiety, but as he passed the same spot where the crash had occurred, he saw headlights in his rearview mirror. His heart sank as he recognized the familiar shape of the older man's vehicle, the same sinister grin illuminating the darkness. As the man's car closed in, Mark felt an overwhelming dread. He accelerated, but the SUV matched his speed, keeping pace as if savoring the chase. Desperation clawed at him. He couldn't let this be the end. In that moment, she realized that the line between reality and nightmare had blurred. As she stumbled backward, she felt the cold grip of the unseen passenger, the vengeful spirit of the woman from the woods seeping into her soul, ready to take her along for the final ride. Mark swerved off the road, taking a side path into the woods, hoping to lose him in the trees. But the man's laughter echoed behind him, a chilling reminder that escape was futile. Every turn he took, every path he tried, led him deeper into the nightmare. Finally, he came to a clearing, his car's engine sputtering as he stopped. The world around him grew eerily silent. Mark stepped out, heart pounding, ready to confront the ghost of his rage. But the older man wasn't there. Instead, the shadows began to shift, and Mark felt the air grow cold. He turned slowly, sensing a presence behind him. The man emerged from the trees, now surrounded by a swirling mist. "You can't escape your anger," he whispered, his voice echoing as if it came from everywhere at once. "It will always find you." Mark's heart raced as he realized that he was not merely facing the man but the embodiment of his own rage, the darkness he had unleashed. As the mist closed in around him, he understood that he was trapped in a cycle of vengeance, bound to the road for all eternity, forever reliving the moment he lost control. And in that cursed loop, the final ride never truly ended. Every encounter on that lonely road became a part of his nightmare, where the line between driver and passenger blurred into a chilling eternity of rage. Story 3: The Stolen Moment. Lily was driving home after a long day, the sun setting behind her, casting an orange hue across the road. She felt relieved to finally be free from work, her mind racing with thoughts of the cozy evening she had planned. But as she navigated through the suburban streets, she encountered a truck that seemed to be driving far below the speed limit. Frustration bubbled within her. She honked, then swerved around the truck, giving the driver a brief, angry glance as she passed. It was an older man with graying hair, his face set in a deep scowl. She could almost see the rage boiling beneath his surface. As she accelerated, she dismissed the encounter, eager to put distance between them. However, a few miles down the road, she noticed the truck tailing her closely. Her heart raced. It was as if he was waiting for the perfect moment to retaliate. She sped up, feeling the knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Each time she glanced in the rearview mirror, the truck was right behind her, almost too close for comfort. Desperate to escape, she turned down a winding back road that led to a quiet stretch of forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches arching like skeletal fingers. She thought she had lost him when she heard the unmistakable roar of the truck's engine behind her. Panic surged as the truck rammed her car, sending her spinning into the brush. The world spun around her, and she slammed her palms against the steering wheel, struggling to regain her bearings. When she finally managed to stumble out of her car, she looked around, disoriented. The truck had come to a halt nearby, and the man stepped out, his expression twisted in a mix of fury and satisfaction. "You think you can just drive like that?" he spat, advancing on her with a menacing swagger. Lily's heart raced as she backed away, her mind racing for an escape. "I am sorry, I didn't mean," but the man interrupted her with a wild laugh, one that sent chills down her spine. "You took something from me, girl, a moment that can't be replaced." Before she could comprehend his words, he lunged at her. In a frantic scramble, she darted into the trees, the thick underbrush snagging at her clothes as she ran deeper into the woods. She could hear him behind her, his heavy footsteps thudding against the ground, fueled by anger. Branches snapped and leaves crunched underfoot, but the trees swallowed her screams, drowning them in the growing darkness. She stumbled into a clearing, the fading light casting eerie shadows around her. Gasping for breath, she pressed her back against a tree, listening intently for his approach. Suddenly, everything went quiet. The only sound was her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Just as she began to feel a glimmer of hope, she noticed the truck idling at the edge of the clearing, its headlights cutting through the dark like searching eyes. The man was nowhere to be seen. Lily cautiously moved toward the road, but just as she reached the tree line, she felt a hand grip her shoulder, spinning her round. The man's face was close to hers, a wild look in his eyes. "You thought you could escape, didn't you?" he growled. In that moment, Lily saw the desperation behind his anger. "What do you want?" she cried, fear coursing through her veins. "I didn't mean to," he interrupted her again, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can take something from someone and not pay the price. You stole my moment of peace on the road, and now you'll pay for it." Before she could react, he pulled her into the truck, slamming the door shut. The air felt thick with a malevolence that made her stomach churn. The inside was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the dashboard lights, casting ghostly shadows over the man's face. "Let me go," she screamed, her voice filled with desperation, but he simply stared at her, unblinking. Suddenly, the truck began to move, the trees flashing by as they drove deeper into the woods. Panic surged again as she realized there was no turning back. The road stretched on endlessly, and the man's grip tightened on the wheel, his eyes locked ahead as if possessed by some dark force. "Where are we going?" she whimpered, her voice trembling, but he didn't respond. Instead, he began to chant softly under his breath, words she couldn't understand but felt resonated with a dark energy. Lily felt the air around her grow colder, the truck seeming to blur and warp as if they were moving not just through space, but through something much more sinister. "You'll understand soon," he finally muttered, his gaze unyielding. As they drove further, she caught glimpses of other cars along the road, cars that looked eerily familiar, their drivers frozen in time, faces twisted in expressions of fear and rage, all trapped in a loop of their own road rage encounters. Terror gripped her heart as realization dawned. These were the souls of others who had crossed the man's path, forever lost in his world of vengeance. In that moment, she understood the weight of her own actions, the small moments of anger that can spiral into something monstrous. The darkness enveloped her, and with it, the knowledge that she had become part of a never-ending cycle of rage and retribution. As the truck continued its relentless journey, Lily felt herself slipping away, her screams swallowed by the night, joining the chorus of lost souls trapped in a world where anger dictated every moment, a world where peace had been stolen forever.